Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, USA Global TV and Radio viewers and listeners. Yes, you are on USA Global TV and Radio, and the program is Talking Heads. I am Mariska, your host and talking head for today, which I do not only consist of a head, there is a body below this. Just if anybody was wondering about that. So, what is our topic for today? Well, we are continuing on our self-awareness exploration and looking into that a little bit more. And I am continuing on my journey of doing this without slides. So let's see how this goes. So what are we looking at today? Now, one of the things that has been coming up for quite a few of the leaders that I work with is this thing around vulnerability. And you may or may not have heard about it within the spaces that you operate. There is a lot around being able to share vulnerably within our teams, within our workspace, and that helps us to build trust and to just in general be able to connect with people a lot better. Now, there's a few things that we need to know about this thing called vulnerability that might trip us up. And some of them might be quite obvious, and some of them, well, is actually not as obvious as you might think. We are also going to weave in a little bit of self-care. So there's going to be a couple of tips at the end of this lesson for us to consider. So within the vulnerability space, what exactly is this about? How does it work? And how does that even relate to self-awareness? Well, first of all, we need to understand what we are capable of actually putting out in the world and we can be vulnerable about, and what is it that we will be vulnerable about and then fall apart and to pieces. Because preferably, when we are vulnerable in the world, yes, we want to show our own vulnerability and we want to show up. And in saying that, so part of that self-awareness is understanding what's happening for ourselves. So when we are going through something and we see that, hey, I need space, I need some me time, I need to think about this thing, I need to take a break from whatever is happening with this group in order to take care of myself. That is being vulnerable, right? That is one place that our self-awareness, our own knowing, helps us in order to keep ourselves in a space where we can function fully and optimally and thrive within the team that we are in. So that goes to the mental health and our resilience pieces, and it's really, really important. So that might be one way that vulnerability might show up for us within our work environment or any other environment, really. There's also the part where when we communicate with our team members, we don't always understand how to communicate this vulnerability thing effectively. Now, somebody not too long ago mentioned that vulnerability, the way that they look at vulnerability, is actually that we get positive vulnerability and we get negative vulnerability. So the way that they've made sense of this is that positive vulnerability is where I can show up and say, hey, this is going on for me. I am not putting it on the other people. And I am not transmitting that the feelings that I have, maybe doubts or angst or any of those sort of feelings that can bring our overall emotional state lower. I'm not transmitting it into the rest of the room, so to speak. Because yes, our emotions do transmit. For in case if you didn't know that, if, say, for instance, you go past a baby that is laughing and just enjoying their day, we will, at least at the very minimum, smile back, right? If they're really enjoying it and they have a giggle fit, we might even laugh with them. So as it happens with laughter and joy, it also happens with frustration and anger. So any emotions that we have that we feel at a very high level will be transmitted between the humans in the vicinity. And yes, you can also catch those emotions online. Haha, just as a fun something for you to be aware of. So when we speak about vulnerability, it is really understanding what is the emotion that I am transmitting into the room. Now, the other thing that we also want to consider about vulnerability, and this is something that I recently learned, is we can have something after sharing vulnerably that is called a vulnerability hangover. Now, Brene Brown came up with this term. There's also a technical term for it within the physician space. So within the medical field, there is a technical term for it, and I can absolutely not pronounce it, so I'm not even going to try to do that. But yes, it is a thing. So literally what happens when we sharing vulnerably, our body go into a fear state, a fight or flight state. Now, for most of us, we will know that when our body go into a fight or flight state, we start to produce all sorts of hormones and all sorts of things in our body in order to help us get through that. Now, in the past, it would have been to run away from a tiger so that our muscles work better, we can feel our heart pumping, all of those things happening. And when we're in an emotional state where we are going to share vulnerably, all of those things still happen. Now, that becomes toxins in our body if we do not get rid of it. And what ends up happening is we might get a lovely headache that sort of creeps up from your back and your neck up. So it creates some lovely headaches, which I would definitely not suggest. They're not a lot of fun. But if I don't want the headache, it means that I don't share vulnerably. No. That's not the way it works. We can counteract these symptoms. So what I also want to have us note is the fact that depending on the degree of feeling that we have around this share, it will influence what happens in our body, right? So if it is for us a very vulnerable share, It might not be so for someone else, but if personally we feel that is a very vulnerable share, those levels will be increased, which practically means that it's the same as, well, drinking too much alcohol. The more alcohol we drink, the worse the hangover, right? The same with this vulnerability that we share. The higher the emotion that we feel within that space, the higher the hangover that we will have afterwards, because we are actually manufacturing more and more and more of our fight and flight hormones. So, taking that into consideration, and yes, still wanting us to share vulnerably within the workspace, how do we do this? Right? How do we actually go about sharing vulnerably if it's going to have a negative impact on us? And for some people, it might be that they did share vulnerably and then they found this impact and they decided, nope, this is not for me, I'm not doing it again. Because it's almost like burning ourselves on a hot stove. I mean, I burned myself once, I'm not going to do it again. Now, to start off with, when we're sharing, yes, it does have a tendency to secrete all of these things in our body. And every time we share, it gets less. So it helps us to share it because it actually gets out of our system, literally. The impact of the share for us reduces. So it makes it easier for us to be able to share it. So that's the one piece to it. The other piece to it, to help us really be able to understand how to reduce the impact of the hangover, is to practice some self-care. Now, what do I mean by this? To start off with, if you think about going for a massage, whether it's a sports massage or whether it was for fun or a couples massage, whichever one it was, what do they typically tell you at the end of said massage? Drink a lot of water. Why? Well, they ask us to drink a lot of water because it helps all the toxins that they massaged out of our muscles to be flushed out of our system. So water is a cleanser that helps us to clean our body. The same applies when we drink too much. Well, if we had a very fun night the day before and we were clever, we would have had one beer and one glass of water and one beer and one glass of water. And guess what? The next day, you will most probably have, if anything, no hangover, right? It really reduces the amount because the alcohol takes fluids out of the body, so it dehydrates us. And the water not only hydrates us again, but it also flushes out all the toxins. And alcohol is one of that. Our body doesn't really need that. So what happens then with a vulnerability hangover? Same thing applies. Drink a lot of water. So when you have been in a space where you've had to share vulnerably, or there was some form of vulnerability that took place for you or the other person. Remember what I shared around we actually can contract emotion. So that is the case with vulnerability sharing as well. It doesn't only affect us when we're sharing it, it also affects us when we hear it. So we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves by drinking a lot of water in order to flush out all of those toxins out of our system. And there's a couple of other things that we can also do. So typically for most leaders, for most human beings, we suggest exercise. Now, what does exercise do? Well, it keeps us nice and fit. It keeps us in prime condition. It has all these other benefits within life. And for vulnerability-based hangovers, it also helps us to take the toxins out of our system a little bit faster. So that also helps us out. And then the other areas that we can also focus on, because it might be brain related, so we want to make sure that our mental state is really well taken care of. And in this area, meditation helps us quite a bit. So utilizing our meditation practice, and this looks different for different people. I know for some people, they think about meditation as a sitting in lotus pose and being very quiet for about an hour. And other people will think about that and go, oh man, I won't be able to sit still for even half a minute, never mind a full hour. So our meditative practice is really around helping our brain to quiet down, to be calm, and to let thoughts go and be. So however it is that you do that, utilizing that practice for yourself to recalibrate and realign our mind. And then that brings us to realigning the body. So the way that we realign our body and our nervous system, because heightened emotions and all of these other things that take place inside our body will cause us to get into misalignment, is one of the easiest ways that I know of personally is through our breath. So when we think about breathing, most of us don't breathe enough. We breathe way too fast. So the recommended breathing tempo is around about 5.5 counts in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 5.5 counts out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you may find that you can easily get to the 5 in and easily get to the 5 out, or you might find that it is quite difficult to get to 5 in and 5 out. So practicing our breathing and also making sure that we do this, especially after any heightened emotion. For instance, when we had a vulnerable share. So this also helps us to distribute oxygen to all those areas in our body that require it, including our brain, and it helps our nervous system to realign itself in order to not be sort of all over the place. So those are the top things for us to do. You can also include some grounding practice and energy clearing practice if those are things that you would like to do and try out. They're really good. They also help us to get rid of all the energy that we do not want within our space and in our body, and allow the good nourishing energy to fill us. So that's some self-awareness and self-practices that we need to bring into our space. And this is especially important for leaders. Now, why is this especially important for leaders? Well, the reason why it is especially important for leaders is because we show up with our team. And we don't only show up with our team, we also show up in different departments, in different areas. And because all eyes, whether we want to know this or not, all eyes are typically on us when we are a leader, it means that people are more likely to catch emotions from us. They also take a lead from us. I mean, that is in the word, after all, leader, right? So they take the lead from us, so they take our example. And if we don't practice good self-care and we don't have a self-awareness as to what exactly is going on for us in our body, in our system, in our own system, they will also not cultivate and be trusting that they can express when they need to be able to do this. So it helps us in two ways, because it helps us both to regulate ourselves, and it also helps our team and the people that we work with to regulate themselves properly. And in doing all of that, we are able to not only share our vulnerabilities, but also build trust that when you might go into some of our other trainings around building teams, you will notice that that trust piece is definitely the foundation when it comes to team building. So with that, we have in this session learned that we can definitely get a vulnerability hangover. The way it typically shows up for most people is by a very uncomfortable headache. And no, normally headache medications, stuff like that, I have found personally for myself, they don't really do the trick. It takes a couple of days. So if I didn't do the practices that I just explained to you guys, it takes a couple of days to actually get rid of it, because my system is then trying to recalibrate itself over time. And it takes a lot longer to get rid of said hangover. So understanding the impact that it has on our physical body, as well as how we then can actually show up in the world, helps us to implement some of these great practices that we have learned: drinking water, making sure that we increase our breathing and decrease our pace of breathing, as well as getting some exercises in our space. Yoga is a great practice because not only does it remind us to breathe, it also helps us to exercise. So, hey, you've got 2 for 1 there. And then also doing some of our other mindfulness and grounding practice. So with that, I will love and leave you guys to enjoy sharing vulnerably and responsibly now with those around you, and also knowing that you now know how to take care of yourself and those around you while you are enjoying creating better connections. Until next time, I enjoyed my time with you. Bye-bye.